Okay, so I haven't updated my Pokemon trade binder in years. I think the secret weapon is you look up a patent to have a compartment drawer in your binder, big binder. And when I see someone having a Venusaur EX mint condition display, maybe some other Venusaurs, but they're not looking for much. You get out your Pokemon the First Movie VHS tape. You have to type in a secret code. I'll just tell you right now, it's 1556. You gotta make it look all high tech, and then they'll hear the sound effects. You open it up, boom! Here's the tape. And even if they don't have a VHS at home, you get that Blockbuster label. I think you're set. I think you're good. You got a good shot at getting that mint Venusaur EX. And I'm just saying, VHS tapes, if kids are calling floppy disk save icons, which is hilarious, like in school right now, VHS tapes might become vaporwave drives. But honestly, it is really cool to see the kind of analog movement where, Gen Z on, there's a lot of people in those generations that kind of are looking back at the 80s and 90s fondly, 70s, and that type of analog aesthetic for audio and video in general. I think that's really cool. I recently talked about one of my favorite fictional characters, Obi-Wan Kenobi, on Star Wars. And Star Wars is everywhere. It's a cultural phenomenon since 1977. And you have to think about what makes it such a big hit. I mean, the music is grand. It's a cool sci-fi setting. It's an epic. The Star Wars A New Hope alone is, in my opinion, it really is one of the closest things you can get to a perfect movie. And, talk about setting the bar from the get-go. And what's funny is when you go to the prequel trilogy with The Phantom Menace, when it came out, there were people that were complaining about the politics. But it's Star Wars, not Star TV special. We're all just actors here, and you actually can catch Darth Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn having a coffee backstage and talking about what they're going to do later today when they go play 18 holes of golf. No, what's cool is that Star Wars, it takes itself seriously, and that includes its politics, right? These are the characters in this world, and war is one for one with politics. Obviously you try to avoid war. In the real world, war is just terrible for both sides in general. And in Star Wars, when people complained about Episode 1's politics, I think they underestimated the competency of what George Lucas was trying to address. And, being able to hone one's intentional awareness is a useful weapon to have throughout life. Unfortunately, in the prequel trilogy, the Jedi, as they mentioned, the Sith haven't come back in a millennium, and they got a bit nested. They were in a good seat in the Old Republic. Spoilers, yeah, the Old Republic, unfortunately. And they didn't think that, again, they brushed off the Sith. And lo and behold, Senator Palpatine ended up, revealing himself as Darth Sidious. And so in this case, you look at the politics of Phantom Menace and how that's him. The Phantom Menace is talking about Emperor Palpatine and how he rose his way through the ranks of the Old Republic and its politics. And, when you look at what happened, how could Palpatine keep rising through these ranks? But it's believable because in the real world, there are manipulators just like him. There are people that try to hone in on social pressure. And then if they're caught, they'll try to play victim and say, I'm too weak, don't let him kill me, right? But honing intentional awareness is one of the most consistent skills you can have for yourself. Because whether you are trying to make new friends or negotiating with another business as a business owner, being able to read intent from others can take you a long way. It's in the dating field, people call it red flags and green flags, right? And you could go into like really deep like charts about what's a red flag and what's a green flag just in the world of dating. But these type of indicators, this type of way of mentally tracking what is dictated as good and bad behavior, there definitely could be consistencies there. And you start delving into psychology, and obviously someone like Emperor Palpatine is a maniacal psychopath. But that's the thing, is that he's a manipulator. So good old grand evil Palpatine wasn't shooting lightning, at face value. In the prequel trilogy of Star Wars, he tried to look like a humbling, calm, and very welcoming senator, and he kind of pulled it off pretty well. He took advantage of Anakin Skywalker lying to himself. His fear, Anakin's fear of, first he lost his mom and he didn't want to lose his wife, and so Palpatine, exploited those fears, all with that kind of facade. And, unfortunately, by the time where so many of the Jedi were extinguished, eradicated, which is awful. I recently rewatched Star Wars Episode 3, and Order 66 is the tough scene. Because, the Jedi, they mean to do well, right? That's the whole part of the Jedi Code, is to protect, to make the world, the galaxy, the universe, a better and safer place. But because the Jedi in general weren't working on intentional awareness, for someone like Palpatine, he was able to swoop in and take a lot for himself. And then ironically, by the time of the original trilogy, the Empire becomes really complacent. But unlike the Jedi, the Empire is wrathful, and in their arrogance, they think that they can't be stopped. And so, that's why the movie's called A New Hope, and, Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to help Luke Skywalker really take these big accolades in stopping the Empire, who, again, brushed them off. Grand Moff Tarkin is a big example of someone that, in his own arrogance, felt his own demise, right? So, people often say the intentional awareness of the Jedi was clouded by, quote, arrogance. I wouldn't call it arrogance for the Jedi. I would say that there is a bit of, again, the term is nested. My good friend Cameron used that term many years ago when he talked about in fighting games, there are players that want to be, quote, nested, where they're almost afraid of new factors being promoted against them, new threats. They want the game to be solved. They think that every time that they pick Kirby and their opponent picks Mario, they should win. Right? But that's not how fighting games work, and again, we all press buttons differently. So by being nested, you cheat yourself out of honing intentional awareness. If you weren't nested and you played Kirby, and you understand how does this Mario play, not only will you learn, but you can start honing even more of a skill of understanding how that person individually presses buttons. And so, in the case of Star Wars, the Jedi not only were a bit nested in being, peacekeepers, but Palpatine, used a clone war to further distract them. Because by Episode 3, especially, like Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, Yoda, they were all really skeptical, and they already kind of were, of Chancellor Palpatine. But he definitely orchestrated, a galactic war to help distract them. So in the real world, that happens all the time. There are some malicious people that don't want to reveal their intentions. They're playing poker against you, and they want to hide that they honestly just have a 3 and a 4. And they try to talk down on your 5 and your 6. But with your own confidence and intentional awareness, you could take a lot of chips at that table. You could call them out, and they might play victim, they might try to lie, but at the end of the day, you still get to play the game, right? So, and then this is where we start delving into like court of law, journalistic investigation, how valuable the truth is. The truth is such a big value to have. And, really the big picture of all this is understanding intentional awareness. And I think the big part of that is that you need to not only respect yourself, but understand when you are being disrespected and picking up on signs when someone's intent is not of good purpose. And what's really tough are people like Senator Palpatine that act like they're good, that act like, I love democracy, but they're trying to build a tyrannical empire, and in the real world that happens with people trying to gain sympathy. They're taking advantage of how human civilization has pushed itself, and we've constantly built upon human civilization from the foundation of trust. Trust is so important. Being able to trust other people that they can obey traffic laws, that we can all get to where we need to go safely and hopefully help to make the world a more productive and safer place. That's big. Being able for me to trust that, my mechanic will fix my car and, not rig it so where my brakes malfunction, that's big too. There's so many examples of where trust, by having trust, we can excel, not just as a species, but a world. And so unfortunately, there are bad people in this world that want to take advantage of that. And they'll try to shroud their intentions, making it look like they're good, making it look like they're kind. But the big thing to take from this is to really hone your situational awareness and hone your awareness on intent. And I think sometimes that can be hard. It can be hard to admit that, oh, maybe my friend I've known for a few years isn't as kind as I thought they were. Maybe they're using forms of shallow flattery to keep me around. So I don't call them out as much. Maybe my friend is not as kind when I really take a look at how they treat other people that might not be relevant to them. The best thing you can do is not only use genuine kindness to help others feel accepted, but you need to keep you need to keep honing your sword. You need to hone your shield and make sure that you are constantly aware that unfortunately there are people out there. They're going to try to take advantage of trust, and they're going to try to shroud feelings of self-pity and try to make it look like that they can get a lot of things out of you. But if you respect yourself, you can hold your ground and you have healthy boundaries. Not only will it help you, but it can help inspire other people to recognize those situations, create healthy boundaries for themselves, and create a ripple effect to hopefully isolate people that are doing these bad things and then get them to hopefully reflect. There are some people like Emperor Palpatine where he had quite a few chances, and that's just, the karma coming at them. And in this case, it was Darth Vader understanding that his son means well, and that deep down, he done so much of this because he loved people. He loved his mom, he loved his wife, he loved Obi-Wan Kenobi like a brother, and he loves his son. And at the end of the day, that triumphed over the shroud that he saw Emperor Palpatine. I mean, by the time he was Darth Vader, he knew Emperor Palpatine was evil. But he hated himself so much, he had no self-respect, that where was the hope for him? That's why it's so beautiful that Luke is both A New Hope and the Return of the Jedi. That type of courage that he can help invoke in other people, even someone that's seen as evil as Darth Vader. Overcome someone like Palpatine that has been trying to shroud their evil intentions for so long and manipulate others. But it takes that form of bravery. It takes that form of self-drive, and hopefully inspired by others, but hopefully to inspire other people to do that. And again, the biggest leap is where you have to sit there and fight that human instinct. You might be in what you think is a tribe, you might be what you think is in a group. But then you take an outer look and you realize that group is filled with a bunch of narcissistic people like Palpatine that try to shroud their bad intentions with, these giant labels of I'm good, I'm a good person every time they're caught. So you take that step back and you realize this is not healthy. And you take that brave leap forward and you can find a brand new life filled with much more prosperity. But the most important thing is you're treating yourself well. You're treating yourself well out of a value of self-respect, void and away from narcissistic tendencies. These tendencies that often stunts, self-growth. It's always about someone else's problem. It's always someone else being the problem. But if you can start analyzing the problem for yourself and start solving the problems for yourself, this goes back to my great-grandma Nala talking about a hand up, not a hand out. And I think that's big to inspire others. It's big to invoke courage of strength. You keep doing that, and I think we're going to have a lot better tomorrows. I love Mondays.